Discover the amazing hidden truths of the Roman Empire. 10 incredible transformations revealed. The rustle of papers faded into silence as Sarah stared at her classroom of disinterested students, their energy draining from her like steam from a kettle gone cold. The weight of budget cuts loomed over her, an oppressive cloud that drained passion from her lessons. Fighting against apathy felt increasingly futile. She was a history teacher in the small town of Maplewood, yet the history she revered was met with indifference. At 34, Sarah envisioned inspiring her students with the vibrant narratives of the past, but they seemed more enthralled by their phones than the Roman Empire. What was she doing wrong? Desperation clawed at her, making her question her chosen path. Amidst the chaos of hopelessness, Sarah rediscovered an old journal in the attic, hidden underneath decades of dust. Her grandfather's carefully penned thoughts leapt off the pages, a weathered testament to his love for history. Sketches of ancient battles and handwritten notes echoed his dreams of becoming a historian. Yet life had derailed him. The thought gripped her heart tightly. Her mind raced. What if she could channel his passion to reignite her own classroom? She dove deeper into the pages, finding narratives of power struggles and class divides that resonated eerily with the present. 10 events from the Roman Empire burst to life before her, each a reflection of today's struggles: economic inequality, ambition overshadowed by privilege, and the relentless quest for justice. With each revelation, she could already visualize lessons that would not just teach history, but show its relevance. But doubts bubbled within her. Would their students embrace it, or would they, like so many, continue to turn away? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The ripple effects of her newfound inspiration ignited skepticism among colleagues who prioritized standardized tests over innovative ideas. Were her ambitions naive? Anxiety surged. What if her effort felt like a tempest in a teacup, destined to drown in the insistence for conformity? During the staff meeting, silent faces turned to her as she tentatively pitched her project. The air was thick with disapproval, mirroring her fears. Notes were scribbled, eyebrows raised in disbelief. Despite the mounting reservations, Sarah was determined to forge ahead, ambition taking root in her heart. She clung desperately to her grandfather's spirit, a beacon guiding her through the storm. Night after night, her kitchen table became a battleground. The juxtaposition of crafting lesson plans amidst mounting dread left her breathless. Then came the school board meeting, a pivotal showdown for her conviction. Standing there, facing the board members and parents, she felt the burden of their criticism like shackles around her wrist. Her voice trembled as she expressed the similarities between the struggles of ancient Rome and those faced by their community. Questions ricocheted around the room as she sought validation, each inquiry slicing through her resolve. Could she trust in the transformative power of her teachings? What if her grandfather's dreams held no place in their world? As voices clashed and the air crackled with tension, Sarah's heart raced. This was her moment, and she teetered on the edge. Would she finally break through the wall before her, or would the legacy of the past be silenced amidst the noise of the present? The murmurs following her presentation melded into a chaotic symphony, drowning Sarah's thoughts. Who was she to challenge the foundations of her colleagues' beliefs? Their skepticism gnawed at her, a relentless whisper fueling her self-doubt. Standing there, the board members' stony expressions felt like a sea of judgment pressing down on her. Yet she couldn't let this moment slip into history's abyss, just like her grandfather. With a renewed spark in her chest, she resolved to push forward. More meetings loomed in the coming weeks, but the one she dreaded most was with her principal, Mr. Hastings. He had a reputation for adhering strictly to the curriculum, navigating change like a ship in a storm. What would he say? Would he simply tell her to stay within the lines? Hastings' office was adorned with diplomas and accolades, a testament to his unwavering commitment to traditional education. As she entered, the air felt charged with expectations. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, observing her with an intensity that made her swallow hard. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady, "I've heard some intriguing things about your presentation.
You made quite a stir. Anxiety twisted in her stomach, but she grasped the edge of the desk beside her, grounding herself. I believe history can foster connections with our students. If we frame it around their lives, perhaps they might engage. He pursed his lips and looked thoughtful, clearly weighing her passion against practicality. But you know how our state testing works. Those objectives are paramount. I'm afraid straying too far could jeopardize our standings. His words hit her like a punch. The enormity of the situation washed over her, threatening to drag her back into the quagmire of despair. Once again, doubts crept forth. This wasn't just about the past. It felt like a battle for educational reform.
I understand that, she replied, her voice firm, but excel beyond those scores. History isn't just about memorization. It's about connecting with the present and seeing the relevance of the lessons learned. We risk losing their interest entirely. He raised an eyebrow, as if he hadn't expected this boldness. You need a plan, a tangible approach I can present. Show me what you envision. Of course I can, she responded, adrenaline surging. If I could have a pilot program to showcase how I can integrate these themes effectively, it might convince you. His gaze softened slightly, yet caution lingered. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'll give you a chance, but it depends on results, Sarah. You'll need to demonstrate concrete outcomes. Pride swelled in her chest, but also fear. She had her foot in the door, and now she needed to prove that history could breathe life into her classroom. The pressure pulsed like a heartbeat, spurring her to action. Preparations began almost immediately. Sarah immersed herself in research, drawing from her grandfather's journal, weaving together engaging narratives and energetic activities that would draw students' attention. Each lesson became a puzzle she delighted in piecing together, every historical event a thread to connect to modern struggles. A week later, as she walked into class, the students' eyes were glued to their phones, indifferent to her arrival. Regret crept in. Doubt seeped through her hopeful resolve like water through a sieve. Then she remembered. History was alive and messy. It was a living conversation, not just dates and events. All right, everyone, put down your phones, she commanded, heart racing. Today we're discussing the fall of the Roman Empire and what it means for us today. She proceeded to draw parallels when, without warning, a hand shot up from the back, a bold student named Josh, known for his disruptive behavior. Why should we care about that? It's ancient history. The room fell silent as she regarded his spirited question. Here it was, the moment of truth. Could she turn this challenge into an opportunity? Fueled by newfound resolve, she leaned forward. Because, Josh, she smiled, excitement stirring inside her, the rise and fall of empires teaches us about power, justice, and humanity. Trust me, this will matter more than you think. Those words hung in the air. For the first time, she sensed a shift. The promise of dialogue awaited. Sarah confronted her fears, ready to engage those disinterested faces. What was the worst that could happen? As she unleashed the story of Rome, she felt adrenaline racing through her veins. Perhaps this was not just a lesson on history, but a lesson in determination. The legacy she would leave, not just for her grandfather, but for her students too. Would they embrace history's lessons, or reject the path she carved for them? That question lingered as she turned to face the classroom.
Yet the stakes felt higher than she ever anticipated, and a new fear wrapped around her heart. Would her drive be enough to spark a genuine interest in her students before an inevitable confrontation with the administration threatened to unravel everything she fought for? Sarah's heart raced as she faced her class, the weight of their indifference hanging heavily in the air. She clenched her fists, determined not to be dissuaded by the initial skepticism. The challenge raised by Josh's question echoed in her mind, demanding a response that would capture not only his interest, but the attention of the entire room. Imagine a world where decisions made centuries ago still influence our daily lives, she began, pacing slowly in front of the students, gauging their reactions. The Roman Empire wasn't just a collection of battles and emperors. It was a complex society that changed the course of history. Their governance, their laws, their art, these elements matter to us today. Let's explore how their public work systems are reflected in our own infrastructure. As she painted this picture, she could see a flicker of intrigue in some of their eyes. Sarah seized the moment. What if we could plan our own version of a Roman city? What would be essential to include? How would we manage resources? You'd be architects and citizens navigating modern issues with ancient wisdom guiding you. A murmur of conversation broke out, students exchanging ideas, a buzz of creative energy that made her heartbeat quicken. Even Josh leaned forward, chin resting on his hands, a flicker of interest replacing his earlier antagonism. "Let's divide into groups and sketch out your ideas," she encouraged, the excitement palpable. "You'll present to the class tomorrow." Throughout the lesson, she felt a unity form. Students who rarely participated began to voice opinions. Laughter erupted when someone proposed a ludicrous emperor who would ban homework, and the room filled with a sense of purpose. Sarah's doubts began to fade, replaced with a burgeoning confidence. Her excitement continued to build over the next day, first as she watched each group passionately present their versions of a Roman city. Josh stood out, his group designing an elaborate plan for a wellness center combined with a library, citing health and education as crucial pillars. "If we want to thrive like they did, we need to care for our minds and bodies," he declared, his tone earnest and convincing. After the presentations, Sarah facilitated a debriefing. The conversations flowed naturally. Students debated the merits of their plans, critiquing one another in the spirit of improvement. This was it, her vision coming to life before her. Yet lurking in the corners of her mind was the dark specter of Hastings' impending scrutiny. If these results weren't tangible enough to satisfy him, she risked losing everything.
In her late preparation, she began organizing assessments based on student engagement and participation. She could quantify the enthusiasm filling the room, but she needed to intertwine it with curriculum objectives to ensure preservation against any future objections. The next morning, Sarah sat in her cluttered classroom, awaiting the arrival of Hastings, the anxiety curling in her stomach once again. Today was the day he would witness their progress firsthand. She had to make him see the potential she uncovered in her students, to recognize the power of connecting history to modern life. As he entered, the pupils fell silent, observing his presence as if he were a figure of authority walking into a council chamber. His gaze swept across the room, taking in the colorful designs of imagined Roman cities hanging from the walls, the traces of active discussion still vibrating in the air. "Ms. Green," Hastings began, his voice stern but tempered with curiosity, "I'm here to see if your methods live up to the excitement you've created." Every eye turned to her, the weight of expectation almost unbearable. Could she articulate the sea change in her students' motivation? Would he listen? Her thoughts raced as she prepared to present not just her lesson outcomes, but the transformation she had fostered within her classroom. "Mr. Hastings," she said, stepping forward, "the students have found their voices, and they are excited about history. The results are clear." But before she could finish, the door creaked open, and ominous figures from administration appeared, their expressions unreadable. What new challenge awaited her? Would they support her innovative approach or stack the odds against her efforts to evolve education within these walls? A knot of dread tightened in her chest as she braced herself for battle, pushing aside the fear racing through her veins. Was she ready to face the consequences of her efforts? The moment hung precariously in the balance as a new storm threatened on the horizon. A tense silence enveloped the room as the administrative figure stepped in. Their presence instantly shifted the atmosphere. Sarah could feel her heartbeat echo in her ears, her mind racing to strategize her next move. She instinctively shifted, drawing on the confidence she had built with her students, channeling their energy as her own, but doubt gnawed at her resolve. "Miss Green," one of the newcomers, a woman with dark glasses perched on her nose, said, "We've heard reports about your recent lesson. There's talk about the efficiency of your methods." Her tone was meticulous, scrutinizing every word. "Efficiency?" Sarah echoed, her voice steadier than she felt. She instinctively reached for her notes, prepared to defend the structure and intention behind her approach. "This isn't just about efficient teaching. The students—" "Please, allow us to observe," the woman cut her off, waving dismissively at her notes. "We're here to assess." The tension mounted as they settled in the back of the room, their eyes sharp, ready to dissect her every move. Focusing on Hastings, who remained steadfast, Sarah felt a surge of determination. This was her moment, not only to defend her methods, but to showcase her students. "All right," she began, her voice gaining strength. "Today, we'll revisit the creative works my students produced on the influence of Roman architecture in modern society." She paused, gauging her audience, as behind her the students straightened with renewed purpose. "Let me show you how they can think critically and creatively, applying what they've learned to real-world scenarios." Sarah briefly scanned the class. Josh caught her eye, and she smiled, heartened by the glimmer of enthusiasm reflected back at her. "Let's bring forward our first group." The presentation unfolded beautifully. One after another, students articulated not just their designs, but the rationale underlying their choices, drawing comparisons to both ancient practices and modern civic needs.
As they spoke, Sarah witnessed the shift in energy. Where once stood reticent students, now emerged passionate young minds, capable of eloquently defending their ideas. This was growth, real learning in action. However, the administrative figures remained impassive. Sarah felt their eyes boring into her, calculating and dissecting. Insistent whispers of insecurity returned, and she kept her focus locked on her students. Their success was her success, and their engagement was the proof she needed. Time passed with excruciating slowness until Josh wanted to present the concept of sustainability within their Roman city's design. When you think about the Roman aqueducts, they didn't just provide water. They represented a sustainable model for community health and cohesion, he explained. If we embody that idea, we can create a library and wellness center that emphasizes wellness alongside knowledge, nurturing the mind and body. The words resonated. Sarah's heart lifted as she observed a flicker of intrigue ignite in Hastings' eyes. She leaned into this momentum, beckoning the students to share ideas on collective health and education that mirrored their ancient insights. Yet as the last presentation wrapped up, the administrative figures remained silent, their expressions unreadable. Uncertainty blazed within her. Would they recognize this transformation she nurtured, or would they dismiss the energy, the talent, the potential present in her classroom? "Thank you, everyone," she concluded, her voice barely above a whisper, yet filled with conviction. "This isn't just a lesson, it's a movement toward a better understanding of our world." Silence hung thick in the air, and time seemed to halt. Then, the woman in dark glasses leaned forward slightly. "Miss Green, impressive enthusiasm," she stated flatly, "but enthusiasm alone doesn't drive results. What are your measured outcomes?"
A cold wave of realization washed over Sarah. In that moment, her heart sank. She had let her focus on creativity cloud the necessity for quantifiable success. The storm was gathering, and she felt unprepared for the fallout. This was a blow, certainly, but it also ignited a fierce determination within her. She couldn't just accept this challenge. She had to rise to it. "Let's discuss how I can incorporate more measurable outcomes into my curriculum," she stated, exposing her willingness to adapt while asserting her belief in the potential of her students. "But I refuse to sacrifice their passion for education." The tension morphed into a palpable energy, a battle line drawn not just between them, but within herself as well. The gauntlet was thrown down. Could she find a way to quantify excellence without extinguishing the spark she had ignited? As she prepared to assert her vision amidst the impending scrutiny, Sarah wondered if she had the resources to balance the drive for measurable success with the necessity of fostering genuine enthusiasm. The realization loomed dreadfully close. The fight for her teaching philosophy had only just begun. The air in the room remained thick with unanswered questions. Sarah felt the weight of the administrative figure's scrutiny bearing down on her like a storm cloud, thick and ominous. She could practically hear the gears of their minds turning, calculating the efficacy of her efforts. The echo of Josh's words still resonated within her, a potent reminder of what education could achieve. Yet in the face of evaluative pressure, that promise lacked the concrete weight she needed. Determined to transform this challenge into an opportunity, Sarah retreated to her office after the meeting. Slumping into her chair, she felt the knot in her stomach tighten as she stared at the scattered papers on her desk. The thrill of creativity contradicted the demand for measurable outcomes. All those bright ideas, how could she encapsulate them into data points that would meet the assertions being laid upon her? She booted up her computer, the blue glow illuminating her face. A sense of resolve surged as she began typing. Creating a hybrid curriculum was not just about imposing a new layer of metric to her teaching, but forging a structure that preserved the essence of her students' passions. She envisioned a framework that interwove creativity with measurable assessments, empowering students to channel their enthusiasm into tangible outcomes. As she drafted, her mind raced back to her students' presentations. Each articulate expression of thought ignited a spark. Perhaps it was possible to devise practical assignments that still allowed them the freedom to dream. She could incorporate rubrics that focused on originality, peer reviews, and self-assessments, tools that would parallel creativity with accountability. In her fervor, she stumbled upon a realization that momentarily distracted her panic. This wasn't merely about statistics. This was about fostering resilience. If she could frame assessments not as judgments, but as integral parts of their learning journey, she would create an environment that thrived on motivation rather than fear. The ideal wasn't to quell creativity, but to amplify it, proving the power of innovation through numbers without sacrificing the joy of discovery. The next day, back in the classroom, Sarah felt invigorated. "My students deserve the best," she reminded herself, silently affirming her new plan. "Today, we're going to focus on our next project," she announced, excitement brimming in her voice. The students looked up, eyes wide with interest. As she laid out the framework for their next assignment, designed to intertwine collaboration with individual accountability, a wave of engagement washed through the room. Artists, architects, historians, they began to discuss ideas about Roman influence in a broader context, weaving personal passions into actionable plans. Each concept presented was an opportunity for them to explore the intersection of creativity and quantifiable goals. As discussion swirled around her, Sarah noticed Josh setting aside the expected template for architectural models. Instead, he sketched connections between Roman aqueducts and sustainable design ideas. Where she had once faced doubts, she now bore witness to unrestrained creativity blossoming before her. Yet, as they collaborated, she felt the shadow of the administrative scrutiny looming. Her improvisation wouldn't quell their demands. With a blend of conviction and nerves, she reviewed the assignments that began to take shape. She created metrics from their ideas, tracks that could capture individual narratives while meeting required standards. It was an audacious task. Could she maintain the essence of joyful learning while also appeasing the relentless call for assessment? As she left the classroom that day, a gnawing uncertainty tugged at her. Each choice felt pivotal, balancing on the precipice of creativity's rebirth. Would her strategy suffice? Would she be able to keep both passion and accountability alive? The journey ahead was fraught with emotion and challenge, and she knew the road was just beginning to unfold. Sarah's heart raced with anticipation as she glimpsed a new perspective on potential failures and triumphs waiting ahead. She had begun crafting a bridge between her students' enthusiasm and the rigid metrics that threatened to break their spirits. But now it was up to her to traverse that gap and realize what was truly at stake. In the privacy of her thoughts, lingering questions whispered insistently. What if her new approach fell short? What if the assessments alienated the very creativity she sought to nurture? Still, an insistent flicker of courage ignited within her. It was time to assess her ideals head-on, challenging herself and her students to rise to this pivotal moment. Something had to give, and she wouldn't back down until she found what that was. The clock was ticking towards their upcoming project proposals, and the judgment loomed larger than ever. Tomorrow would mark the first moment of truth. She had to step into the meeting with administrators prepared to defend her vision. She could feel the current pulling her toward a reckoning that would challenge everything she had fought to build. The time had come to make her case. Would she be embraced or shunned? The morning dawned with an air of nervous anticipation. Sunlight streamed through Sarah's office window, illuminating the clutter of notes and sketches spread across her desk. She could feel the weight of her new direction pulsing through her veins, a mix of hope and apprehension. There was no turning back. Today was the day she would present her vision to the administrative team, blending creativity with structure in an innovative curriculum. As the clock ticked down to the meeting, Sarah prepared herself mentally. She reminded herself that the plans she had crafted were not just theoretical, but actual representations of her students' potential. Each rubric, each assessment, was intricately tied to the elements of their creative projects. She envisioned the bold path before her as a means of fostering not just academic performance, but the very spirit of inquiry that gives learning its true value. With a final glance in the mirror, she straightened her posture, channeling an inner resolve. The very essence of her teaching philosophy depended on this meeting. Stepping into the conference room, Sarah felt a shift in her stomach, flipping between doubt and a growing conviction. Sure, the scrutiny of her colleagues loomed, but she steeled herself with the image of her students glowing with enthusiasm as they articulated their ideas. As the meeting commenced, she presented her framework with fervor. Our students must engage with material in a way that resonates personally, she argued, her voice steady despite the critical eyes upon her. By marrying creativity with accountability, we can elevate their learning experience. It's not about losing creativity to metrics. It's about cultivating a richer, more authentic form of learning. The room was silent, the walls seemingly closing in as the administrative panel listened intently. There were nods of recognition, but also expressions that conveyed skepticism. It only heightened the urgency of her mission. With each point she made, showing how her assessments could measure creativity without stifling it, she felt a rush of adrenaline. This wasn't merely a defense, it was a declaration of her commitment to her students' growth. Comments started filtering in from the panel. How can we ensure these creative metrics align with our current standards? Questioned one administrator, his brow furrowed.
It was a question she had anticipated, but following the first wave of discomfort that surged within her, Sarah responded. By creating direct correlations between creativity and established learning objectives, the rubrics will maintain fidelity to educational standards while ensuring the joy of discovery is not lost. The ensuing discussion felt like a battle, one that pushed her to dig deeper into her conviction. With each challenge levied against her, new ideas churned in her mind, igniting a fire she hadn't realized could burn so brightly within her. In a moment of spontaneity, she shared a few student examples from her classroom, recounting how they had intertwined personal passions with core curriculum content in ways she'd never seen in practice. As she concluded her presentation, Sarah felt the weight of 1,000 potential outcomes resting upon her shoulders. Had she done enough? Did the emotion behind her words translate into the resolve she wanted to convey? Silence hung in the air, thick and electric, before the lead administrator finally broke it with a reserved nod. "We will discuss this further and get back to you. Thank you for your insights." The moment of relief was fleeting, as feelings of uncertainty enveloped her once again. Would they truly understand? Would they see the potential for innovation she envisioned, or would they retreat back to the safety of rigid structures? As she left the meeting, she realized that regardless of their decision, this was only one step in her personal journey. The essence of her mission, the drive to create a nurturing environment for her students, would guide her in future challenges. She walked out of the building, heart pounding. With the wind whipping her hair back, she glimpsed the horizon filled with endless possibilities. Yet the lingering doubt resurfaced. What if the resistance she faced became insurmountable? Could she be the change her students needed, or would she inadvertently contribute to the very system she aimed to transform? As she prepared for the day's classes, Sarah felt both emboldened and anxious. The road ahead promised to be fraught with difficulties, but she was determined to navigate it. The true test wasn't just in the metrics she had proposed. It lay in sustaining her newfound identity with unwavering resolve. In her heart, a question echoed. How could she parlay the outcomes of this meeting into a wider culture shift within her teaching environment? The answer awaited her. She of course knew there would be more engagements required, deeper battles to confront, and perhaps even personal sacrifices to make. But what she didn't know was that the most profound challenge was yet to come, and it loomed on the horizon like an uninvited guest. As the days rolled on, Sarah found herself submerged in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The tentative nod from the lead administrator reverberated in her mind, but it provided little comfort. Instead, she wrestled with a pervasive sense of urgency to dismantle the conservative barriers she sensed within the institution. Each conversation with her students reinforced her belief that education needed to evolve. Yet here she was, waiting for potential change, while immersed in the same traditional routines that sparked her initial discontent. In the days following the meeting, her instinct drove her to adapt. Sarah began her classes with a renewed sense of purpose. Energized from sharing her ideas, she incorporated elements of creative exploration into her lectures, inviting her students to conceptualize their learning in ways that reflected their voices and experiences. The classroom transformed. It buzzed with laughter, debate, and authentic engagement. Yet despite the palpable excitement, recognition of looming threats continued to gnaw at her. During one particularly lively class session, Sarah introduced an open project where students could explore a subject of their choosing connected to the curriculum. As she roamed the aisles, her heart swelled at the sights of passionate discussions and innovative ideas unfurling before her. Then she overheard a group of students questioning whether their creative endeavors would matter to those evaluating their performance. The undercurrents of doubt threaded through the room like an unwelcome guest, yet she faced these doubts without losing her resolve. Trust in your creativity, she urged, her voice filled with the ferocity of belief. Every idea you bring to life adds value to your learning. The assessments will reflect that originality. This assertion hung in the air, and for a moment the doubts dissipated. Yet an unsettling feeling persisted at the back of her mind. Was she merely feeding a hopeful narrative? Was she risking her students' futures by not preparing them adequately for assessments conforming to outdated standards? In the days that followed, Sarah turned her questions inward. Every night she pored over her lesson plans and student feedback, seeking to align emotional engagement with the fortress of academic rigor. Hours morphed into late nights filled with new strategies, yet the weight of uncertainty pressed upon her shoulders. Was it possible to harmonize authenticity with institutional expectations and still protect her students' innovative spirits? Then an unexpected opportunity struck. The administration announced a panel discussion aimed at facilitating dialogue on educational reform. Sarah seized this chance, determined to voice her students' experiences and inspire change. In preparation, she spent evenings drafting her presentation, interspersed with moments of self-doubt. Could she articulate her ideas clearly enough to sway the skeptics, or would she falter under scrutiny? As the day of the discussion approached, the echo of her earlier presentation lingered like a shadow.
"The time has come to face the establishment," Sarah whispered to herself in the mirror, trying to conjure the assurance she sought. She envisioned the panelists' dry faces transformed by her impassioned arguments, yet the fear of being misunderstood or dismissed simmered beneath her resolve. Finally, as she stood at the podium, a deep breath steadied her nerves. She gazed at the assembled faculty and district leaders, ready to unleash her diplomatic arsenal. However, the moment she began to speak, an intense uncertainty flared within her. Would they see her vision as a threat or an asset? She began with a recount of her students' stories, weaving their aspirations into her narrative. As she painted a picture of vibrant classroom interactions, she noticed a glimmer of interest flicker in a few eyes. But even as momentum built, lingering questions surfaced, igniting a creeping apprehension. What if her message remained trapped within the confines of tradition? Before she could finish, familiar doubts loomed, those very doubts she confronted in her classroom. The past echoed in her mind, and amidst the urgency to inspire action, a fear nudged at her resolve. Would her passion translate into influence, or would it bounce off those thick walls of convention once again? In that moment of vulnerability, it hit her. She could not rely solely on words to enact change. She would need to show them what was possible, not just tell them. Would she muster the courage to not only fight for her vision, but also to embody it in every aspect of her professional conduct from here on out? As the questions hung in the air, a deeper realization began to dawn. Perhaps the struggles ahead required her not just to advocate, but to challenge a deeply entrenched status quo, starting with herself. Suddenly, the full weight of her ambition could no longer be ignored. Her heart raced as clarity emerged through the fog of doubt. This was not just about her students, or creating innovative metrics. It was also about transforming her personal approach to the very institution that she worked within. She was the embodiment of change, whether or not they recognized it yet. As Sarah stepped down from the podium, she knew the stakes had shifted. The next steps awaited her: more engagements, possible confrontations, and choices that might alter the very fabric of her teaching philosophy. In the coming tide of challenges, a profound resolution awaited, and she felt an awakening within her like never before, one that begged for action. Would she break free from the confines of fear and uncertainty to redefine her role as an educational advocate? The question now loomed large as she braced for the uncharted territory ahead. As Sarah left the podium, the energy of her resolve pulsed through her veins, invigorating her mind with a new sense of purpose. The seeds of her ambition had been planted. Now she needed to cultivate them into a flourishing reality.
Yet, as she navigated the corridors of the institution, whispers of apprehension followed, urging caution. The battle lines were drawn, and with every step she took, the echo of her own doubts loomed larger. Determined to confront the uncertainty that gnawed at her, Sarah stayed late the following evening, surrounded by stacks of books and notebooks filled with notes from her students. Each scribbled comment and suggestion transformed into pieces of a larger puzzle. She noticed a pattern emerging, a reflection of her students' desires and frustrations. They sought authenticity and relevance. They craved validation in an environment that often valued conformity over creativity. Fueled by this realization, Sarah committed herself to a dual path. One avenue involved advocating for educational reform within the institution. The other meant exemplifying a transformative approach to her teaching. She mapped out her vision for a curriculum that encompassed not just knowledge acquisition, but also the development of critical thinking, creativity, and emotional intelligence. As she tirelessly drafted proposals and lesson plans, a quiet confidence began to replace her fears. However, the atmosphere around her remained a tapestry of resistance and lingering skepticism. Conversations with colleagues showcased varying degrees of acceptance or outright refusal. Some scoffed at her efforts, dismissing her approach as impractical, while others viewed her as a threat to their established methodologies. During a particularly heated faculty meeting, Sarah found herself confronted by the very voices of tradition she aimed to challenge. "Change for the sake of change is reckless, Sarah," one veteran teacher warned, her tone dripping with condescension. "What's wrong with the tried and true methods? They've worked for decades." The air thickened with tension, and Sarah felt a familiar surge of anxiety clamoring for her attention, but she fought to keep at bay. "Respectfully, I believe our students' future deserves to be more than just a maintenance of the status quo," she countered, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "We owe it to them to prepare for a world that is already evolving right before our eyes." For a fleeting moment, her conviction sparked curiosity within a few colleagues, and she seized the opportunity. In the coming weeks, Sarah organized informal gatherings where she invited her peers to engage in dialogue about educational trends and innovative practices. Slowly, she began to notice subtle shifts. Some teachers expressed interest in her methods, eager to discuss how they could implement small changes within their own classrooms. Even in the face of resistance, the energy was palpable, and the collaborative spirit began to foster a sense of community, a world apart from her earlier isolation. Yet beneath this wave of collaboration lay the fragile foundation of her own understanding.
As she journeyed deeper into her advocacy, Sarah faced an internal dilemma. Could she balance her commitment to innovation with the practical realities of risk? A lingering fear of failure shadowed her, threatening to derail her momentum. Was it enough to inspire others if she faltered in her own methods? One fateful afternoon, as she prepared to conduct a workshop for her colleagues, the weight of her fears surged to the surface. What if her ideas fell flat? What if her attempts at reform led to greater disappointment for her students? The questions spiraled, begging for resolution. But as she took her place at the workshop, the familiar tension melted into focus. She found strength in her vulnerability and chose to embrace her uncertainties as part of the journey. Today, I want us to explore together. What does meaningful education look like to us? She began, her tone inviting collaboration. It was the moment she realized that even if her methods remained untested, the passion to engage in the exploration itself held transformative power. The workshop transformed into an open forum of ideas, and Sarah witnessed the kind of dialogue she had longed for. Laughter mingled with serious contemplation, suggestions floated, and the very act of collective inquiry fueled her conviction. Each contribution from her colleagues felt like bricks being laid down along the pathway to change. As the session concluded, she felt invigorated, but aware of the hurdles still ahead. She understood the risks she faced, realizing that the path to meaningful reform was riddled with uncertainty and personal challenges. Yet she also recognized that this was precisely where her growth could manifest, through confronting doubts, inspiring others, and leading by example. The journey ahead was fraught with potential confrontations and revisiting her foundational values. Would she stay the course, navigating both triumphs and setbacks as she battled for a vision that was starting to take root within the institution? A glimmer of intrigue hung in the air. What new challenges awaited, and how would she rise to meet them? The days following the workshop merged into a blur of activity as Sarah plunged deeper into the transformative vision she had proposed. Each evening, after the last students had left and the halls fell quiet, she continued to refine her lesson plans, undeterred by the murmurs of skepticism that still lingered among her colleagues. It was not just a matter of overhauling a curriculum. For Sarah, it was a mission to set a new educational standard that honored both creativity and critical thinking. However, self-doubt waged war within her. On one hand, the enthusiasm from a handful of peers reinvigorated her purpose. On the other, fears crept in, whispering that she was a lone voice fighting against a tide that had for years accepted mediocrity.
One late evening, with the light of her desk lamp illuminating stacks of papers around her, she grabbed a pen and started jotting down her latest thoughts. Can one's influence extend beyond the classroom? Could she inspire a real culture shift within the institution? It started as a simple conclusion. If she wanted to enact change, she had to embody it. Therefore, she needed to exemplify her principles in tangible ways. The realization sparked a renewed vigor. Sarah decided to create a pilot project in her classroom, showcasing an entire unit based not on traditional assessments, but on student-led initiatives and presentations. It was a radical departure, and while there was a palpable thrill in the prospect, anxiety bubbled beneath the surface. The following week, she rolled out her plan.
Students were divided into groups and encouraged to pick subjects that resonated with them, topics that delved into their curiosities and passions. Surveying the classroom, Sarah witnessed a wondrous transformation. Where once her students had sat listlessly, now they engaged with excitement, brainstorming ideas and collaborating as if they were in a think tank rather than a classroom. Yet with every pulse of innovation came a twinge of apprehension. What if they became too invested and failed to meet the basic learning objectives? What if the administration deemed the project a failure? The gnawing questions returned, chipping away at her confidence. Confronting these fears head-on, Sarah resolved to document the journey, capturing evidence of student enthusiasm, engagement, and learning outcomes through recordings and reflective journals. But the true test came when the date for student presentations approached. As she prepared to introduce them to the broader faculty, a familiar knot tightened in her stomach. What if they dismissed the students' work as frivolous? What if my colleagues refused to see the value in my approach? The stakes felt exceptional, yet the fire of determination flickered alive once more. On presentation day, Sarah stood at the front of the room, her heart pounding as her students set up their displays. She breathed deeply, channeling her nerves into an aura of encouraging energy for the students. They spoke passionately about their projects, embodying the essence of their learning experiences. The room filled with a mixture of awe and surprise from the faculty members as they witnessed their students in roles they had never anticipated. In that moment, a profound realization dawned upon Sarah. It wasn't just her own passion that ignited change. It was the power within her students that made her vision tangible. They embodied the transformation she sought for the institution. When a few colleagues approached her afterward, intrigued and eager to learn more about the students' concepts, their curiosity felt like the first break in a long-standing wall of skepticism.
As she engaged them in conversation, bright ideas flowed unexpectedly, sparking new collaborations. Sarah felt exhilaration, complemented by the undercurrent of uncertainty. Would this enthusiasm endure? Could it permeate beyond her own classroom and inspire her colleagues to reconsider their methods? Just as she began to map out her next steps, a message from the administration flew into her inbox, demanding her presence in a meeting scheduled for the following day. The tension coiled tightly within her. Was it to acknowledge her approach, or was it a calling to defend her strategies against potential scrutiny? As she reflected on the future ahead, a single question echoed. How would she respond to the challenges of authority that sought to shape the outcome of her journey? The path ahead felt as precarious as it was promising. The time had come to brace herself and confront the demons that lurked within institutional walls. The next day, Sarah entered the admin building with a heart pounding in her chest. The challenge before her was unprecedented, a test of not only her educational philosophy, but her very identity as a teacher. The stakes felt higher than ever. Gathering her courage, she reminded herself of the numerous transformations her classroom had undergone in recent weeks. Today, she was determined to present not just her vision, but the tangible changes it had fostered among her students. The conference room buzzed, filled with stern faces from the administration panel. Sarah took a deep breath, remembering all the late nights spent strategizing how to interweave creativity with educational standards. As she began to present, the overall tone shifted. She outlined the success of her pilot project with confidence, detailing how her students had engaged deeply, expressing themselves through their chosen topics. Through student-led initiatives, she explained, we have achieved not just knowledge retention, but also critical thinking, collaboration, and enthusiasm. The metrics I've compiled show notable improvements in participation and understanding of historical contexts. As data and student testimonials streamed from her presentation, a series of nods began to appear among her audience, but one face remained unyielding, Mr. Hastings. He challenged her points, focused on the need for standardized test preparedness. These projects, while impressive, do not guarantee that they will meet state educational standards, he argued. What about their readiness for assessments down the line? Sarah felt a pinch of anxiety wrap around her as she prepared to respond. Mr. Hastings, the goal isn't to lessen our focus on assessments. Instead, I propose integrating project-based assessments alongside standardized tests, allowing us to cultivate students' love for history while ensuring they develop necessary skills to succeed in evaluations. Her confidence surged as she spoke.
This was no longer merely about defending herself, it was about championing her students. The dialogue changed as colleagues began discussing how they could implement similar projects. Their interest ignited as they envisioned the potential this methodology offered.
Each connection she made breathed life into her initial vision. This was the beginning of substantial change, an environment where creativity and accountability could coexist. Eventually, the room quieted, and Mr. Hastings wore a softer expression. "I appreciate your passionate defense of your students, Sarah. Let's schedule a follow-up to examine a framework for integrating these initiatives school-wide." Elation flowed through her. She had done it. This encounter solidified not only her position, but her belief in the value of her teaching philosophy. The shaking uncertainty of the administrative meeting was now overshadowed by a profound sense of accomplishment. In the following weeks, Sarah embraced her newfound role as a mentor for her colleagues. They collaborated on lesson plans that honored student creativity, but still aimed to meet required standards. The synergy created enthusiasm, and even the most skeptical teachers began to recognize the merit in her empathetic approach to education. As the final school year assessments approached, Sarah remained cautious. She knew the readiness of her students hinged upon balancing their creative projects with the necessity of standardized tests. In the weeks leading up, she layered her lessons to encompass broad themes while refining their skills, an innovative method of hands-on learning, culminating in successful student performances that proved their proficiency on exams, but more importantly, instilled a newfound passion among them. Sarah's journey had come full circle. The reluctance she had first encountered was now replaced with recognition, both from her students and the administration, who acknowledged her leadership and innovation. Each high five from her students reaffirmed the impact of her approach. She had transformed educational despair into inspiration, transforming her classroom into a living testament of engagement and creativity. In the final meeting of the year, her principal announced a new initiative inspired by Sarah's project, a school-wide program aimed at integrating student interests into educational practices. Teachers and administrators found themselves not merely working within conventional boundaries, but also challenging those constructs together. In that moment, Sarah felt a wave of fulfillment wash over her. She stood as a symbol of change, not just for herself, but for every student who had walked through her door. They had embraced history as a living narrative, empowered by the lessons of the past while anticipating bright futures awaiting them. She had achieved her mission.
Now, understand this. If this transformative journey resonates with you, if you see the power of passion in education, subscribe immediately to the channel, because you need to stay tuned for more exclusive emotional stories that inspire. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Every click counts, showcasing the importance of these narratives. Comment your reactions and thoughts about the journey. Let's engage in this dialogue together. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this journey of personal achievement and transformation, as your voice leads the way to inspire others. Don't wait even one more second. Show your support today.